In this video, I'm going to show you how to pour epoxy in voids without using a form. Let's do this.
First thing we're wanting to do is to get rid of all the bark. You can leave the bark, but it'll fall off in time. So might as well go ahead and chip it away. A good chisel and a mallet will do a good job for you. When you get the bark off, you're going to want to sand all the soft areas. I'm going to use a wire brush on the end of a drill to sand it. I've also used a random orbital sander, and this is a flattening jig that I made myself. If you want to know how to make one, I've got a video that you can watch about it. I flattened both sides of the slab to get it uniform to prep it before I'm going to pour. The next thing I'm going to do is get rid of the line. So I'm coloring, I'm drawing all over the slab. You're probably wondering what's the graffiti about. The drawing allows me to know where my sanding pads have been and how good of a job that I've done. This here is shellac. We're prepping the top side of the slab with shellac to make sure that it doesn't spill in and the pigment stain it. You can see where the bottom side has been stained from a previous blowout.
Okay, we're back to the slab. I know, again. When you watch epoxy pours, 90% of the time they're going to build a form, they're going to pour the epoxy, it's going to go all around it, then you're going to go through and flatten and we're going to get rid of it, right? Our client wants something different. They want the natural edge and they want to leave it, no epoxy. So we're pouring this without a form. You're not going to find many videos on this. We have had 2 blowouts, not 1, but 2 blowouts. That means we've sealed it and the epoxy got loose and blew out. We're going to have to flatten this side afterwards. It already was rough. We was going to save it because we knew we would get some epoxy on it. We got epoxy all over it. It's not very thick, it's a light coat, but we're going to have to flatten it to take off all of the epoxy, probably coming down 1/4, maybe a 1/2 inch overall. But this is how we sealed it up this time. We've used plexiglass. This is our base right here. Okay, a few days ago, not 1 day, not 2 days, a few, it's been a few days, we put the caulk, the silicone, on. We hot glued on the outside of the silicone. We put down the plexiglass, and then I've hot glued around the edge of the plexiglass. I know, we've done a lot, right? And it still may not be enough. If you have a leak anywhere, this deep pour epoxy is like water. It's going to pour right out, and you can't slow it down. Pause. Okay, now, we sealed it. This is silicone, 100% silicone. It's white so I could see it. That's what we sealed it with. Again, we use hot glue on the inside. What are we going to do if we spring a leak? If we spring a leak, we found out about this. This here is a flex paste made by the same people that's done all of the flex stuff. And you take it, you wipe it on, and it supposedly seals it immediately. And we're going to put it to the test because we've had not 1 but 2 blowouts. And we don't want to do that again. The panel we're setting it on, this is a PVC board. It's very slick, very smooth. If we do get some on it, we can peel it up pretty easily. This is a good sheet to pour on. And again, we're not using a form. We've got our plexiglass. We gave it several days to set up and to harden on the silicone. We reinforced it with hot glue behind it. We went around the edges. Now we're going to flip it over, set it up so that we can see it. That way if it springs a leak, we can see where it's at and we can reach under and wipe it down. Right when we were about to flip it over, we found a breach. It was a small air pocket right inside, and so we resealed it with some hot glue. And if you've noticed, we have extra silicone. I know it's crazy, right? We just keep layering it on. We've had 2 blowouts. We don't want a 3rd one. Now, we're going to let this set up. We're not going to pour it right away. The silicone, it'll have to set for at least 30 minutes. Let's call it a day or 2, and to guarantee no blowouts. When we do pour, we're going to use liquid glass. It's a 2-part. This is a deep pour epoxy. We've got 2.5, almost 3 inches of depth in here that we're going to pour. And we'll be using this blood red black diamond pigment. and together it's going to come out beautiful. And let's pour it in the next day.
As I said, we're going to be using liquid glass. It's a two-part epoxy, deep pour. It's made for deep voids, and you have to mix it thoroughly. You can see the measurements on the side of my bucket there. It's got to be mixed correctly. This blood red black diamond pigment is excellent for the color of slab. This is a box elder slab, and it really highlights and accents the red that's naturally in the slab. Follow the mixing directions thoroughly. And these are the bubbles. I'm using a heat gun to get rid of all of the bubbles before I pour. Now, pouring is going to create bubbles. I'm going to come back after I pour and use the heat gun again to get rid of the bubbles. This is something that I will do several times. Now, I'm not going to pour it real deep on the beginning. As I said earlier, we had 2 blowouts. We don't want to lose a third. So I'm going to fill it about halfway and let that set and set up. Then I'll come back and pour the rest of it. That'll be in the next day or so when it's hardened enough that I can pour a second round. So we're being very cautious on this one. Here I am. I'm mixing it up. It's ready to pour again. You can see that it held the first pour. Now, before I poured the second one, I took sandpaper and scuffed it up so that I could get a good bond between the two. And I'm going to pour it and pour it a little bit heavier because I'll use a flattening jig again to take off all of the top. Look at that precision pour right in the hole. That was a pure accident. Usually I miss it and make a mess, but I used, you can see, the hot glue around the side of the pour to keep it from spilling over and making a bigger mess on the slab. Again, we prepped the slab with a coating with shellac to keep it from staining if it did run over. Now, the next part, when I get rid of the bubbles, I want to make swirls. I don't want a clear, smooth finish. I want to make swirls. So I'm going to get rid of the bubbles with my heat gun. Then I'm going to come back and I'm going to make swirls. I'm going to do this every couple of hours until the swirls thicken enough that they stay for the rest of the slab. After the swirls have set up, and I set my alarm, got up every 2 hours during the night, but after it set up, then it was ready to sand down and flatten again.
All right, we've poured our epoxy, we've given it a day or two to harden, and how do we know? You don't have to touch it, but when your leftover epoxy is hard and not tacky to the touch, this is done also. Now, do you have to throw the bucket away? No. You can reuse it. If you'll put a stick in there, just like this, when the stick's in there, you've hardened it, you just break it free, pull it out, and it will come off attached to the stick, and now you can reuse your bucket. So that's what we're going to do.
I used my flattening jig to flatten both sides of the slab, and I was able to get all of the pigment stain out of the bottom side and prep it for the top side.
We just finished flattening the slab. It was flattened on top before we poured. We flattened the bottom just a minute ago, and now it's time to start cleaning up the top. So the slab is flat, and the way we clean it up, we're going to start with some heavy grit. Look at all that pouring out of there. Heavy grit sandpaper. We got 60 on here right now, and we're going to work our way all the way up to 220. And we're going to sand it smooth, then we're going to seal it and do a little more sanding. Let's get started.
We're using the sander again. We're going to run through every grit from 60 or real aggressive all the way up to 120. Rubio Monacoat's what we're going to use. So we're cleaning the slab just with mineral spirits so that we can get ready for the Rubio Monacoat. Rubio suggests going no higher than 120, 150 on your grit because it bonds better. It's an excellent sealer, so if you haven't used it, you might want to give it a shot. This is Rubio Monacoat 2C plus 2C, and you mix 2 parts together. I'm using a syringe to make sure that I don't get them wrong. Stir it correctly, and then when you put it down, it looks like I'm going to pour orange juice all over the slab. I'm going to take a plastic trowel and just drag it. It sets up in 15 minutes. What you don't finish, you'll have time to do again and with another batch. As you come across with the second batch, it will not, you can't tell one from the other. It blends in perfectly. Rubio is made to blend in, so you won't see where you start and stop. After you get your Rubio completely across the whole slab, you're going to want to wipe it down. I wiped it just with regular towels, shop towels, until I got it all off. You cannot over wipe.
Here we go. We've got the Rubio Monaco plus 2C, and it's been put on. It's dry, but now we're going to buff it. You take a plain white buffing pad. If you want to, you can use your hand. You can use a drill. I'm going to use an older angled grinder. It's got a hook and loop, and I'm just going to go over this whole thing and buff it. It makes it soft, it gives a sheen, and it helps to finish it out. If you like what you heard, give me a thumbs up. If you want to know more about epoxy pours without using a form, let me know. Reach out to me. And don't forget, hit the subscribe button. See you next time.